Okay, got to get all in gear here. Hey, welcome everybody, Googleization Nation. We've got another live stream today. I've got Phil Strazula from Next Wave Hire and also Select Software Reviews. I'm getting a bit of an echo here, so I got to figure out why. So I might be on your, I don't know if it's on your end.
Okay, I actually can't hear anything, but
yeah, okay.
I can hear the echo rather.
Okay, might be on mine, so hopefully that goes away. Just maybe in the system. So we're going to be talking about software updates today. Before we get there, I want to remind everybody, so let me see that I can make all this work. There we got Googleization Nation. If you go up to Bitly, I'll put this across the screen shortly. But if you go up to join Googleization Nation, I'm doing about 2 or 3 live streams every week. Doing our Geek Skeezers and Googleization podcast every week. We got some great people on the line, like Phil. He actually was a guest not too long ago. And we'll be doing a lot of interviews, a lot of webinars next year. So it's free to join, and then you'll get from free updates as we go along. You'll also be able to get a free copy of the 2nd edition of Recruiting in the Age of Googleization, my new book. Or it's my book, but it's going to be a new edition. It's going to be coming out soon. So that should be fun, and you will have the option to get a free copy if you join Googleization Nation. For anybody who's listening, we're on LinkedIn, Google, and Facebook, but since I'm only one person, I tend to monitor the LinkedIn feed. If you got some questions, comments for us, for Phil or myself about what 2020 is going to hold and about software, just kind of give us a, put a comment in the box there, and I'll check the post every now and then. So, but I'm looking away. I'm not distracted, not checking my texts, not sending emails, not checking my Facebook feed. I'm actually trying to look at LinkedIn and see what the action is there, so we can pay attention, everybody, because that doesn't come through the screen that I'm looking at. So let's get to Phil. Phil Strazula, Next Wave Hire and Select Software Reviews. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Busy time of the year. I talked to a couple people already today, and everybody's sort of in the same boat. It's amazingly busy for the end of the year. Everybody's excited about 2020. I think a couple months ago, people were seemingly laying back a little bit, thinking we're going to have a recession. Don't know if I want to purchase anything. We're going to wait and see. But every forecast says, yeah, we might have a little bit of slowdown, but as far as hiring and recruitment and people and workforce, nothing's going to change other than it's going to get a little tougher. So are you hearing the same things?
Yeah, I would say so. And by the way, I can still just see the Googleization Nation.
Yeah. Now there we are.
So yeah, I personally, I think it's almost impossible to predict macroeconomic trends in general. And I think anybody who has a strong conviction around predictions is probably deluding themselves. That said, I think we're probably okay, at least until the election. I think there's a strong incentive on behalf of our current administration to keep the ship fairly steady, and not rock the boat too much. And that'll probably happen because they have such a strong incentive. And so things will probably keep going well. I think also, like, structurally, in the United States, and I think many other places around the world to a lesser extent maybe, are seeing, record unemployment rates. And I think even if we were to go into a recession, it sort of just like brings us almost back to normal. So at least in our sort of functional area. And so I think we're going to be fairly insulated for a long time from any sort of, breaks in the macro economy.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And by the way, on Wednesday, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization this week, we're going to have our final show for 2019. And Keith and I will be doing a little bit of a wrap up. But we've got Alan Ballou from ITR Economics. Alan was a guest of ours in when was it? May or June. It was at the end of May or beginning of June, and he sort of gave us a mid-year, and he predicted by the way, ITR is great. I would follow him for anybody out there. I've known Alan for a few years when I was involved with Vistage a little bit, speaking, and I was a member. And he gives a lot of presentations for them and updates. His firm been around for 25 years or so, maybe more, 30 years, I think. And they have a 95+% accuracy rate. And they're fairly conservative. So they're not going way out there. I mean, they're not predicting these micro issues, but they look at the macroeconomics. And as he said, I already interviewed him. And as he said, the numbers are baked in for next year. What we're talking about now is, any little blips, bumps in the road we'll see ups and downs, but basically they're going to be pretty minor. I mean, major changes, nobody's predicting any through 2021. So everything's pretty much baked in. And their prediction is that unemployment is actually employment's going to rise, or unemployment's going to fall, at least fall or be steady. The same people that are struggling to find jobs will probably continue to struggle to find jobs. And the skill shortages will remain. So it'll be interesting. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about how companies can improve that. I just read a quote. Let me pull this up. I was using it on my LinkedIn feed today. It's from KPMG, and a big survey they did. 3 in 5 HR leaders believe if the HR function doesn't modernize, it may become irrelevant. We've been saying that for a while. So HR needs to get with it. And one way to do that is through software. Software doesn't fix bad practices, bad processes, bad experiences, bad leadership. But without it, I don't know how companies going to make it. So you started the second initiative, Select Software Reviews. I've been following them the last couple weeks or last couple months, I guess. And I don't know how you keep up with it, because I have enough time doing what I do, but keeping up with all the software. So tell us a little bit about what Select Software Reviews is, and then let's hit on a couple of the major areas like video interview software and chatbots, and where you think this is going and what you're seeing with a lot of the software development that you're reviewing.
Yeah, sure. So what we're trying to do at Select Software is just keep on top of what's going on in HR tech, and then write up actionable, unbiased content to help practitioners figure out what are the systems they should actually be looking at. It's very similar to, if anybody reads that website Wirecutter, they review, TVs and stuff like that, or NerdWallet that reviews credit cards, or Consumer Reports. We're basically trying to do that for the HR tech ecosystem. I realize that it's really hard to buy HR tech. There's literally thousands of vendors. Even in certain categories, there are hundreds of vendors. I think in North America, there's like 150 HRISs, which is insane. You throw in ATS, et cetera, chatbots, AI, it becomes really challenging. And so what we're trying to do is just offer really in-depth research. Again, that sort of unbiased research that comes from an expert versus the crowd. I think there's lots of websites out there that are sort of like Yelp for software, which can certainly be valuable, but because the vendors are really sophisticated, most of that content is fairly gamed. You'd be hard pressed to find companies that don't have a 4.5-star plus rating. So we're just trying to illuminate the world, help people make better decisions, and then also upskill on just sort of like general, digital HR stuff. So how do you think about your paid media spend? How do you think about talking to the C-suite about ROI? All these different sort of core skill sets that I think are important for that next generation of HR. As you say, if HR doesn't evolve, it's going to go away. I think a lot of, we've been saying this for a while, right? I think a lot of stuff will always be there. There'll always be a need for this sort of blocking and tackling type stuff. More and more that might be outsourced over time. And then, of course, the best organizations out there are probably going to have a second tier of like people operations folks who are doing a lot more than HR. They're really contributing at a strategic level to the organization. And you're seeing this especially amongst a lot of technology businesses or businesses in really competitive sectors where they have to evolve in order to attract, retain, and sort of optimize the right people. And so they're doing stuff like hiring people from McKinsey to, be the director of engagement at their company and using all these different tools and processes and data to make an impact.
Right. So, and again, I'm speaking to the choir with you, but and probably a lot of people that are maybe even listening. The technology is not going to fix the problem, but there's so much to do. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, there's so many activities that need to be done, so many projects, tasks, innovating. We're all trying to do this all simultaneously. So we're either going to have to get smarter in the way we work, and that's really where HR technology is going to have its major impact, at least in the very near future. I think you've been at some of the events. I've certainly was at a lot of conferences last year. And every software that comes out says it has AI assisted technology, which really doesn't matter if the companies don't have their ducks in a row. They've got databases all over the place. Their practices aren't there. AI is not going to cure anything if they don't have solid practices. But in order to automate some of the processes, be smarter in which they work, that's the role I see it. So let's go down, because you and I can talk all day about this. Let's go down a couple things. On your website, we'll start right at the top. You talk about video interview software. Mm-hmm. We had a really good, we had a couple guests over the last few weeks on that. My interview, mm-hmm. It was up there. It was one of them.
Nice.
We talked with them. Let's see. Was it last week's show? Because we talked with Craig Fisher. So it would have been 2 weeks ago. And it was cool. It was very good. So there's obviously another one. We're not here to promote any individual one, but there's a lot of good video interview software. So what are you seeing in the trends? Not necessarily what's good and bad. They want to do that. They can go up and look at your reviews, the pros and cons and benefits and disadvantages. But what are the trends you're seeing with video software? It's been around for a while. Is it picking up? More companies using it? Where are we going with it?
Yeah, so I think, the core value around asynchronous video interviews is you can save time, you can expand your candidate pool, you can kind of move beyond the resume. And a lot of companies kind of get that now. Everybody's got a webcam, everybody's sort of more comfortable on video. You see companies like Zoom are just sort of like a normal day in the life of most people in corporate America or the world. I think, one of the trends is, can we extract a layer of intelligence on top of the video that goes beyond just sort of like what people say? So that's analyzing the transcripts, it's analyzing body language, et cetera. I personally am not quite sure the technology is there yet. There's a really interesting paper, I think it was Princeton and Cornell PhDs put out a couple of weeks ago that looked at specifically artificial intelligence in HR tech broadly. And then one of the kind of key topics they talked about was video interview software. And basically like the sort of AI quote unquote technology at this point is able to understand that like this is Phil or this is Ira, right, but they're not actually able to understand that Phil is an extrovert or Phil is focused or Phil is diligent or whatever the case may be. There really is no extra signal that they can add at this point for the screening process. And there's also a lot of slippery slopes there because different cultures, different personality types, et cetera, express themselves in different ways. And so the way that an American male extrovert interacts with something versus somebody from, I don't know, pick your country, pick your sort of demographic is going to be much different. And is the AI good enough to understand that? No, it's not. And so there I think are going to be more layers of signal on top of the traditional video interview. And that's happening with like NLP and sentiment analysis and combining with other skill sets. But the AI aspect of things, I think, is not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, and we talked about that, talked about it all the time, and part of that is as it gets better, and there are some studies that the AI is actually AI is a much better predictor of human performance, future performance than most of the hiring managers and HR individuals and so forth. The challenge is when it gets really good, then we get into some real ethical challenges of should we be doing that, and then what happens to all the data behind that.
Yeah.
There was a show, a Person of Interest. I don't know if you remember seeing it was on TV. Person of Interest. I can't remember the characters that were there, but it was about a city, and they had all the cameras out there, and it would be able to kind of look at the behaviors and identify that, and it was pretty futuristic. But the cameras are there, and mostly now it's just to capture motion. Were you there? Were you present?
Yeah.
It gets to the point where it looks at your body language and determine whether you're guilty or whether your intentions were that you were going to be guilty.
Right.
You're right. We're not quite there with HR, but there's certainly a lot of concerns. So let's move on. What's happening with chatbots? I mean, they too been around. A lot of talk about them. I personally don't see like a ton of companies. I mean, I pay attention more to the small, medium-sized businesses too. So I know a lot of the larger organizations might be doing it. You probably have a better perspective on where chatbots are in the business.
Yeah, I think most companies in the global Fortune 5000 have at least looked at chatbots, and many of them have adopted them because there actually is like a tremendous amount of value in using chatbots for HR. And the kind of the core use cases are, one, somebody hits your career website, especially if you've got more than like 10 or 12 open jobs, like you got to navigate them to the right job. You might want to put them in touch with a recruiter ASAP. Let's say, this is a software engineer with 5 years of experience in the relevant tech stack, and you've sort of gotten that from the conversation. They don't need to apply, right? We want to schedule that person immediately. Or if it's for sort of a high value rec that like you've been trying to close, C-level executive, et cetera. People can also, and so there's sort of like a guiding element that will increase your conversion rate on your career website. There's also a content element where somebody can say, what's the culture like, right? And there's a response for that. Or what are the benefits like? What's your PTO policy, et cetera? So that's huge. I think the screening aspect is also huge, sort of, dovetails with the video interview stuff. If you're spending as a recruiting team, and this is particularly valuable, I think, for high volume recruiting, tons of time on just sort of like basic screening questions, get that stuff captured immediately when somebody applies. Make sure that they're a fit before a human being on your recruiting team is spending time with them, especially, 30, 45 minutes. That can be a huge time saver. It can also decrease your time to fill pretty drastically, and also increase the conversion rate sort of throughout the funnel, because this person who is applying, they're probably applying for 5 or 10 different jobs. And if you can be the company that responds to them and screens them the fastest, you're going to be able to hire that person better. There's things like ATS rediscovery where, this sort of like AI and machine learning type stuff can go in and look at your open recs, compare and contrast that with people in your networks or people who've already applied for jobs. And then they can actually reach out to those people and say, hey, there's an open rec. You applied for this 6 months ago. Are you interested in this one? If so, okay, great. Let's answer some screening questions. Okay, great. Let's schedule you with a recruiter. So I can do that scheduling part as well. And so I think the chatbot stuff is really, really interesting. And of course, the chatbot doesn't have to be just in the career side. It can be, WhatsApp, Facebook, SMS, whatever. And there's the part of it that's truly a bot. And then there's the part of it that can be a human being on the other end as well, for different use cases. So I'm actually really bullish on this whole like virtual assistant in HR and talent acquisition thing that's happening.
Yeah, and that's, again, I agree with you. There's so much that goes on. I mean, one of the number one complaints, it depends on the survey you read. One of the number one complaints is that, hey, I applied and they never heard from anybody. So this is a good way to have that interaction. Or I've got a question. Would somebody be willing to apply to a longer application if they were able to ask a question about what the process were, or that there was some progress, or, I don't want to fill this all out to find out, you don't offer this, particular benefit or this role, or it's too far, or I need to commute, or do I have to relocate? So those are instant ones. And this is probably almost about 2 years old, but I remember when the chatbots first came out, I found one. I can't remember whose it was, but I recorded it. I recorded myself applying for a job, and it was 4 simple questions. And this was really the movement talking about applications. Having 4 or 5 basic screening questions, which you talked about, instead of a long application. If I qualify, great, I can move on. And if I don't, maybe I'm offered another position, sign up. You want to get an email alert if there's something, similar to this. But when I was qualified, I was immediately given the opportunity to schedule an appointment. And then that goes back to tying it into the video interview software, because if there's someone available and if it's a tough to fill position, why not say, hey, we're available right now, we can chat.
Yeah.
And on all that. So it's the integrations, it's the convergence of all these softwares that's really becoming pretty interesting, that companies just don't get. So maybe you don't want to use a chatbot for everything, but for a tough to fill position, when somebody shows up on your website, why wouldn't you grab them right away?
Yeah. Or even, forget about the tough to fill stuff, even high volume recruiting, where a lot of the screening is like, what hours you want. And if there's a mismatch there, you shouldn't do a screening call with a person. If you need a visa, if you all these things.
Right.
And so it's pretty cool. And I think it's like one of these things where you're just seeing, again, the sort of best practices in B2B and B2C marketing permeate talent acquisition. And it, kind of generally what I think of like as employer branding.
Right. What are you seeing on, we talked about the recruitment talent acquisition using the pre-hire. What are you seeing chatbots on the post-hire for employment? Because that also,
All right, I lost you there for a second.
Okay, we're back.
So, hey, how's it going?
Not sure if it's my feed or your feed. Yeah, I lost you as well. So what I was talking about was the employee experience. We've got, the buzz. I've seen in the last few days, Josh Bersin, people are familiar with, Jason Averbook. They've been talking. Everybody says next year is workforce experience. And that's the candidate experience and the employee experience. What are you seeing in your reviews or the acceptance on the employee experience? Are companies using chatbots more? Hey, how many vacation days do I have left? How do I apply for this? What's my PTO? How do I file this? Are you seeing a lot more on the post-hire side using chatbots?
I think it's mostly been on talent acquisition. However, there are some really interesting use cases for post-hire. So there's onboarding, where you can structure pretty interesting onboarding workflows. There are, things like you're kind of blocking and tackling, like, hey, what are my benefits? Hey, how do I do open enrollment? Hey, whatever, all these like sort of HR-ish type questions that it's basically like a frequently asked questions sort of thing. I think there's internal mobility. There's employee referrals. So, it's an interesting way to sort of like look at potentially someone's network and be like, hey, Phil, somebody who'd be a great fit for these account executive roles. Can we reach out to them? Blah, blah, blah. And so I think a lot of the things that I guess for me intuitively, you could automate. And the way that I think about this intuitively is thinking about like, what could Google understand as a search engine, right? That's probably like one of the most advanced artificial intelligence platforms out there is the Google search algorithm. And so if you think that like Google could answer a question, then it's probably a good fit for something like a chatbot versus taking up the time of someone in HR waiting for somebody to give you a response, which can be really frustrating on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's keep moving on. We got a couple other areas to cover. We don't want to keep people here all day. Applicant tracking systems. This seems to be the kind of the world of technology everybody loves to hate. There's still, I think the stat is about 50% of companies don't have anything, maybe even more. I would say in small business, it's probably higher. I think in larger organizations, it's pretty high, but it's pretty amazing how many people are still, collecting contact forms and putting all the data in the spreadsheets and, manually posting every job and doing a lot of that. So where do we stand on ATS? I mean, a lot of it's legacy systems. I see a lot of old systems that are integrating a lot of this new software. So you have an old system, but now we slap, it's like, I want to get an image. I want to get some graphic artists to have this image of like an ATS, and then you duct tape, video software, duct tape a chatbot, duct tape, some onboarding software on it. It doesn't make the core product better or easier or more candidate friendly. But there's a lot of more technology involved. So am I being too harsh, or is that sort of where it is? What advances do you see moving forward?
Yeah, so I think this category has come a long way, particularly in the last like 6 or 7 years, with a lot of new entrants that have sort of like a best-in-class UI and UX coming out of the playbook of Silicon Valley sort of thing. In the enterprise, there's certainly a lot of legacy systems. There arguably isn't, maybe there's 1 or 2 companies that are of this next generation that are sort of enterprise ready at this point. But for the most part, the enterprise is looking at Workday or Taleo or Brassering even, or Connexa. And so, your options are still limited there. However, I think that the applicant tracking system now is moving into the direction of being a lot more than just like a database for applicants that kind of check the boxes on compliance. They're adding in sourcing capabilities. They're adding in better analytics. The best-in-class organizations all have open APIs that are easy to integrate with. And so you're seeing hundreds of different applications built into them, whether it's, a job board or a sourcing tool or whatever the case may be, onboarding, the whole employee life cycle. So I think there's like a lot of hope in this category. It has been historically one of these things that everybody sort of loves to hate. And I think a lot of that's a function of just everybody having these very different recruiting processes that are very idiosyncratic. And so it's hard to build one application that is good across lots of different companies. But you are starting to see sort of a tier 1 level of vendors, which, is what we try to highlight on our site, sort of cutting through the noise and distinguishing themselves as easier to use and higher value than just sort of like a dumb database full of candidates.
Yeah. So with these new platforms that are coming out, and again, you can go up to Select Soft Review, selectsoftReviews.com, and look at some of these reviews up there and see what some of the individuals are. Do you see that they're more candidate centric, the newer platforms, versus employer centric? Because most of them before were built from the employer side.
Yeah.
It's like we need, how can we make our job easier as an employer? But then it got easy to have this 14-page application that you put up online, which wasn't very candidate friendly. So are you seeing that the new software, is that one of the things that you evaluate in your reviews? If it, how it can, what's the candidate experience like, the user experience?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think one of the guiding lights is that what's good for employees and job seekers is good for HR. I think interestingly enough, a lot of these legacy systems were built in an era that had much higher unemployment. And so it wasn't incumbent upon the employers to have a good candidate experience. And that's why you saw so few companies that were doing stuff like that. It was like Google, McKinsey, Goldman, a couple companies had kind of figured it out and were in a true war for talent. And now it's every company's in a war for talent. And we have been for years. And so these are all much easier on the employee and the job seeker. And I think they're also easier on the user. I think also historically you saw a lot of these were built for the enterprise. And so the customer was really like the CIO, and they don't use the software, right? They care about InfoSec, they care about compliance, they care about integrations with different tools, and they want to check off the modules to say, we've got referrals, we've got internal mobility. Whether or not those things are usable is a different sort of checklist. And now you're seeing the functional leaders have more of a say in what software to actually buy, you're seeing the next generation of tools reflect that.
Okay. You got a couple other areas here. Let's do one more.
Okay.
And so let's talk about employee engagement software. Again, employee engagement is one of those topics. For 20 years, people have been talking about building the culture. There's a lot of people out there now talking about the value of the culture. Leading on purpose. I'll ask you. Well, if you're reading any great books, you can share them. But I've got actually multiple ones going on. But the two, one I'm doing the Infinite Game, with Simon Sinek's new book. And it's certainly about leading, having a cause and the value of having a culture and getting people behind you. And the other one's Disruption Mindset by Charlene Lee. And Charlene had worked for Gartner and Forrester for the last 12, 13 years. She's had her own analyst firm. And she does, she talks about disruption a lot. And she'll be a guest tomorrow, 12 noon on
Nice.
my live stream. So yeah, she's quite talented. I'm really excited about having her on board. But she talks about similar. I mean, what's that mindset? Getting every so I think employee engagement. It's more than a buzzword anymore. It's not that we won the best place to work and everybody loves working here. It's got to be much more than that. So what are you seeing? How bullish, you used that word before, how bullish are you on employee engagement software or anything new and exciting in that realm?
Yeah, I think it's becoming a must-have for organizations, similar to, you think about like the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of HR tech. It's like, you kind of got to have payroll, right? You got to kind of have like an HRIS and ATS, et cetera. You kind of move up the value chain. And I think employee engagement is pretty much at the base of that pyramid for most companies at this point. A lot of that, again, is like a function of just sort of the macro environment we're in, the way that people expect to be treated, this whole, millennial generation, all that good stuff. And so I think these are becoming more and more of a thing. They're becoming more user-friendly, and they're becoming more data-driven. So they're not just like, let's send out a survey once a year. That's sort of like the old shoe model, right? Of let's send out this 80-question survey that we're going to analyze the results of, and people are going to hate doing. And, the last like 50% of it, they're just kind of checking the box. Let's get information on a much more frequent basis. Let's get more actionable information that will allow us to define the L&D objectives, D&I type stuff. Where are we going to need talent acquisition to step in and help? Where do we perhaps need to do some leadership coaching, like all this other stuff? So I think it's just like a much more user-friendly experience for the employees. You can do a lot of the stuff through Slack, through Gmail, through all the apps that you use right now. You don't have to log into a new system. And there's much more value for the manager level that can get frequent updates to understand, the basic stuff, but also something like, hey, we launched XYZ new initiative. Now we've got ERG groups, right? Like how are the ERGs impacting our ability to attract and retain diversity talent? How are they, whatever the case may be, right? So I think that stuff's all pretty interesting. And then it also sort of the last bullet point here is you're seeing a lot of employee engagement vendors that have a feature set that is also in performance management. And so again, performance management is another category that lived forever in the HRIS and was sort of this like, clunky annual thing. And now with the rise of OKRs moving beyond just Silicon Valley and one-on-ones and all these sort of best practices, it's good for productivity. It's also good from a people analytics perspective for the senior leaders in HR, for the board, for the exec team to understand who's rowing in the right and wrong directions, as well as individuals. And so there's just a lot of cool stuff, I think, that's happening there. And I think it's becoming just like a necessary part of the tech stack for organizations of any scale that want to be competitive with talent.
Right. So as you were talking about that, I don't know if you caught the show. You may know her. You're familiar with Eric Michelson from Summary? You're familiar with the company Summary? It's Summary with an E, Summery. She was a guest a few weeks ago too. Actually, I had done a Bright Talk webinar with her a few months ago. We chatted, but she has a company. It's called Summary, and she has. I'm going to put the banner up here. I just created that. And again, this isn't in. It's related to employee engagement software, but it talks about the culture. You mentioned about, the ability to kind of evaluate where people are. Are people aligned with that? Are you meeting, are they meeting the needs of you? Will they be satisfied within your culture? Will you be able to satisfy them in their career? And what's that give and take? But I put this up here because it's an interesting, it's worthwhile for you to look up. Again, it's not necessarily a beginning to end employee engagement software. But anybody who completes this is like a 5-minute profile. It tells you what your kindness is, what are you generous? Are you discerning? Are you altruistic? Are you enterprising? And then what they did was they basically took this consensus of what motivates me. Do I value education, community, service, pet, animals, saving the earth, environment. And when they collected all this data, they did use AI, an algorithm, to determine what would be the one charity, one nonprofit organization that would meet that everyone who participated in this would feel that it was my cause. They would feel an emotional attachment to it. And it turned out, I don't remember the exact names, but it was something about pets. Pets talk to pets or something. And it was really cool, but go up and try it. But the reason I'm also putting it up here is we did this for the week of the podcast, and then there was a donation made after that. But Aaron and Summary allowed us to keep it open we're going to do it through the first quarter of the year. So we're hoping to get a lot of data in there to help her out. But then they'll make another donation on the behalf of everybody who participates. We'll be sharing that. But that's sort of some of the cool things that are going on in that employee engagement, in there. And again, it's not their software is just one part of that whole piece. Going forward. So next year, we talked about video interview software, chatbots, ATS, employee engagement. Which one are you most excited about? What are you seeing out there? What are you most bullish on? What are you most excited about? Which one do you think is going to be, if we talk again December 2020, which one do you think we're going to be talking about? Changed us over the year?
Yes. What I found is change doesn't happen much in a year. But,
which one are you going to be most excited about next year?
Yeah, I think probably the nerdiest one is people analytics, which relates closest to performance management and just
okay. And we didn't even get to that one, so you can go look at performance management and employee written recognition. Two of the areas we didn't talk about but you can go up to a website, which I'll change that back again so everybody knows where the website is. There you go. You can see it scrolling across the bottom of the screen. You can go up there and look at everything we talked about.
Yeah, select software reviews.
Select software reviews. Oh, I forgot. Okay, we'll change that.
If anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah. Closing thoughts. What's going on?
Yeah, I think that what I'm sort of motivated by is that technology has the ability to basically be the exoskeleton for people in their day-to-day, right? It has the ability to make you so much more productive, have a bigger impact in your organization, which sort of leads to more recognition, more resources, and more room to run with the stuff that you are, nice fix, that was fast, that you are most passionate about, right? If you really care about the culture and you've done 3 successful implementations of HRS, ATS, and some other solution, you're going to have the juice to go do the thing that you really want to do next. And so what I am most excited about is just helping people to build the skill set generally to buy, discover, select, vet, buy, implement HR technology, and then also to point people in the right direction when they're looking at a specific category. You're looking at ATS. Okay, here are the vendors you should actually look at. Here's what you should ask on demos. Here's how you get the budget from your boss. Here's how you implement it. Stuff like that. That's sort of the thing that makes me the most excited. And for better or worse, it's a really complicated space. So we got a lot of work to do, and we'll continue to have a lot of work to do probably forever.
Well, I each time I see the notice, and I follow you on LinkedIn that pops up, I always read them. I sort of live in this space. I'm on the outside. I'm trying to digest this almost, because everybody else is so busy. But it's been really, really helpful, and I'm always excited when I see a name that I recognize or somebody that we've interviewed on one of the podcasts or shows, too, because it means that they're doing well and they're getting the attention. So how can people, other than going up to, as we got to correct it, selectsoftwarereviews.com, how else can they get connected with you, Phil?
Yeah, LinkedIn's always good. Phil Struzula, or, check out Select Software. But I think LinkedIn's the best place to connect.
Super. Any other closing comments, final words, wisdom?
No, I hope everybody has a great, kind of last productive week here of the year, and hopefully everybody gets a chance to relax, reflect, and plan for next year over the holidays.
Yeah, for some people, it's the last week. So it was crazy. It was like, it was amazing. On Monday, I've got a bunch of appointments and calls with people, and it's like, hey, this is the first time we can meet. Otherwise, it's going to be next year. But
I'll be in Miami, so it's my last week.
Good. Having fun. A couple other things you can see across the bottom of the screen. Googleization Nation, if you want to get more updates and hear interviews like I'm having with Phil tomorrow. Again, I'm interviewing Charlene Lee. Her company's Altimeter, and she's got 5 books out. One was a New York Times bestseller, talking all about disruption. A lot of startup. I mean, it's great for startup companies of how to keep it going, but also an existing company, whether you got 10, 20, 30, 40 years under your belt. How do you make that? How do you keep pace with all the things we were talking about today? How do you make those changes? And again, go up to Googleization Nation. Come back tomorrow, 12 o'clock noon.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, Phil. See ya. And have a happy holiday and great time in Miami. I'm jealous. See ya.